Story 1. I came home and found my mother's skeleton in the garden. I had been messaging her just yesterday. Inside the house, I found her diary and discovered a terrifying truth. Someone involved in the incident was. How could this happen to Mom? I had returned to my childhood home after a long time, only to find my mother's skeletal remains in the garden. According to the police investigation, she had been dead for over a month. However, this was hard to believe because I had been in contact with her until just the day before. So who was I exchanging emails with? In the midst of my confusion, I found my mother's diary. When I learned the terrifying truth written in it, I trembled with fear and anger. I had only ever seen my father's face in photographs. Your father passed away in an accident when you were 1 year old. My mother often told me when I was little. I grew up in a single-parent household, but my mother worked tirelessly to put me through college. She was reserved yet strong and kind, my role model and emotional support. My husband, Pete, knew this and respected her, always treating her kindly. Pete was my college classmate, and we got married when I was 26. We started our life about a 2-hour drive from my childhood home. However, my mother, who had been overworking herself for decades, began to fall ill frequently and often had to take time off work. Mom, why don't you come live with us? It would put my mind at ease. My husband says it's fine too. That's very kind of you, but I prefer living alone. It's more comfortable for me. She replied with an apologetic look, gently refusing my offer. I could understand her feelings, but as her daughter, I couldn't help but worry. So at my suggestion, we started communicating almost daily. My mother wasn't tech-savvy and even struggled with emails, so we always talked on the phone. Hearing her voice every day was a comforting moment for me. Living apart, of course, I wanted to see her face sometimes, but due to my busy work schedule, I could only visit her about once a month. To make up for this, my husband would help out when he could. If you can't make it, I'll go check on her. Don't worry, he'd say. Thank you so much. It's a big help. Your mother is important family to me too. Saying this, he would visit her from time to time without complaint. My husband was kind, but he had a bit of a problem with money management that worried me. He would buy things without considering the price or consulting me. We had argued about this many times, but his spending habits didn't improve, so I had to restrict his allowance. However, one day I was shocked when I saw the credit card statement. Why is the bill so high? It's over $11,000. Oh, that's, Pete stammered, hanging his head. This defeats the purpose of setting an allowance. What did you spend it on? Well, the other day when I went out drinking with friends, I ended up treating them. What? You can't afford to pay for others. I raised my voice in anger without thinking. I'm really sorry. It won't happen again. My husband seemed to reflect on his actions and swore he would never waste money again, so I decided to forgive him. However, less than a month later, that promise was broken. This time, he had used our joint savings without my knowledge. I really needed the money, he said. That's the worst. How could you touch our savings? I'm sorry. I'll put it back when I get my next paycheck. My husband apologized, but he didn't seem very remorseful. This really upset me. That's enough. If this continues, I'll divorce you. When I said this in the heat of the moment, my husband suddenly became flustered. No, please don't do that. I'll really change from now on and be more responsible. He apologized repeatedly, almost in tears. There won't be a next time, but I haven't forgiven you yet. It depends on your actions from now on. I decided this would be the last time I'd turn a blind eye, and I declared this to him. I thought he might repeat the same behavior soon, but if he did, I'd leave him without question. After that, Pete started consulting me even for small purchases. Not only that, but he also began to help more with housework and became even more attentive to my mother's well-being, showing a very dedicated attitude. Since then, we had no more money problems and lived peacefully. However, about 4 years into our marriage, something strange happened with my mother. I've caught a cold and lost my voice, so please communicate by email for a while. I received an email from her. What? How? I was surprised by this sudden change, as she had never been able to use email properly despite my many attempts to teach her. But given the content, I became worried. Are you all right? Should I come over now? I don't have a fever, and I don't want to risk giving you a cold, so you don't need to come. The replies came fast, faster than I'd expect from my technophobe mother, which made me even more uneasy. Something felt off. I wanted to go to her house right away, but I was in the busiest period at work and couldn't find the time. Should I go check on her instead? My husband offered. Would you? I'm sorry to always rely on you, but that would be a great help. I thanked my husband for his offer and asked him to go. The next day, he visited my mother. When I returned from work, he reported her throat seemed to be in bad shape, but otherwise, she was fine. This put me a little at ease, but I hadn't been there in a while myself, so I decided I'd go see her face as soon as work settled down. Several weeks passed, and as the hot summer was coming to an end, there was a distinct feeling of autumn in the air, especially in the mornings and evenings. I was still only communicating with my mother via email, which made me feel somewhat lonely. My work had finally passed its peak busyness, and I unexpectedly got an afternoon off, so I decided to go visit my mother after a long time. I'll surprise her by showing up without notice, I thought. When I arrived at her house and rang the doorbell, there was no response. There didn't seem to be anyone home, so thinking she might be out, I used my spare key to enter and wait for her return. The house seemed dusty as if it had been closed up for a long time, so I opened all the windows. Then, as I glanced towards the garden, I noticed that part of her vegetable patch, which was her gardening hobby, had been disturbed. Why is only that part messy? When I went out to the garden, I saw traces of digging in one specific area. Curious, I decided to dig there myself. To my horror, I uncovered a skeleton. I screamed, collapsing in fear, shaking uncontrollably. I immediately called the police using my phone. While waiting for the police to arrive, I fearfully looked at the remains again and noticed something familiar buried with them. It was the necklace I had given my mother for Mother's Day. No, why is this here? Although I didn't want to believe it, the worst-case scenario flashed through my mind. Is this, Mom? Faced with this unacceptable reality, I felt as if my body was slowly sinking into a deep swamp. 10 minutes later, the police arrived and began investigating the garden. Allison, are you okay? My husband, whom I had contacted, also arrived, and we were questioned about the situation. We told them that my husband was the last person to see my mother and that I had been exchanging emails with her until the day before. The police seemed puzzled by this information. According to the condition of the bones, she had been dead for over a month. Moreover, they couldn't find my mother's cell phone anywhere. But I was emailing with my mother. She was even considerate of how busy I was with work. Allison, that's enough. It's okay. I was in such shock that I couldn't think straight and could only cry. From that point on, my husband took care of all the preparations for my mother's funeral, while I felt like I was in a dreamlike state. Before I knew it, the funeral was over. Thinking I should organize my mother's belongings, I started visiting her house every day. While cleaning out her dresser, I found a letter-sized box. Oh, how nostalgic. Inside were drawings I had made of my mother when I was little, letters, and presents, all carefully preserved. I was touched that she had treasured these things, and as I picked up the contents of the box to look at other items, I noticed a relatively new notebook at the very bottom. It appeared to be my mother's diary. Wanting to know more about her recent life, I hesitantly turned the pages, only to find something unbelievable written there. What? This can't be true. Learning the horrifying truth, I felt a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I'll never forgive this. Determined to corner the culprit who had tormented my mother and done this to her, I began preparing my revenge. 2 days later, when both my husband and I had a day off work, he took me out for a walk. I'm just glad you're in the mood to get some fresh air, he said. Yes, I suppose so. My husband was happy that we were going out together after I had been depressed about my mother for so long. I'm a bit tired. Shall we have some tea? We decided to enter a nearby cafe. The interior had a few businessmen and groups of middle-aged women scattered about. My husband chose a window seat, and we sat facing each other. What would you like to drink? I think I'll have a float. His eyes sparkled as he chose from the menu like a child. Hey, I have something I want to talk about. Will you listen? I said to him. What is it? What's wrong? He asked, meeting my gaze. Well, you see, I've been wondering about something regarding my mother. How is it possible that I was emailing her the day before she was found when she had been dead for over a month? Well, maybe the killer was pretending to be her and replying to delay the discovery. He seriously shared his theory. Of course, that was the first thing I had considered too, but there were several things that didn't add up. But isn't it strange that one of the emails mentioned wanting to go back to the spa we all went to before? Only the three of us knew about that spa trip, right? Well, that's true, But couldn't it just be a coincidence, he said. As I muttered, I wonder, he nodded while sipping his float. However, he seemed somewhat flustered. Look at this, I said, taking out a document from my bag and placing it in front of him. Mom seems to have been sick. I found this while cleaning out her things. It was a medical diagnosis. I hadn't known about it until I saw it, but my mother had an illness that required treatment. Did you know about this? I asked. No, I didn't, he replied. I see. When I called the hospital to confirm, they said my mother had stopped coming for appointments at some point. It seems she even quit her treatment midway. My husband crossed his arms, appearing to be deep in thought. Maybe she had her reasons, he suggested, like not being able to afford the treatment costs. Maybe, but there's no point in thinking about that now, is there? He looked troubled and gradually became more restless. I stared at him directly. You borrowed money from my mother, didn't you? Of course not. Why would I? Although he denied it verbally, he was clearly panicking. I want you to be honest. The truth is, you borrowed over $20,000 from my mother, didn't you? As I pressed further, my husband, either angry or defensive, stood up and slammed the table. How dare you suspect me? You're out of your mind to suddenly say such things without any evidence. Maybe you're the one who's a bit tired. My husband's aggressive voice instantly drew the attention of everyone in the cafe. Realizing this, he apologized and sat down, lowering his voice. The other customers quickly looked away, but they seemed interested in our conversation and were stealing glances while trying to eavesdrop. I do have evidence, I said. To his surprise, I placed a notebook in front of him. It was my mother's diary that I had found while cleaning her house. What's that supposed to mean? He asked confrontationally, as if he was on guard about something. I turned the pages and read aloud what was written there. The diary detailed how Pete had been threatening my mother and extorting money from her, along with the exact amounts. Moreover, you threatened to hurt me and ruin my life if she didn't lend you money. That's despicable. It seemed that when my mother said she couldn't lend any more money because of her treatment costs, my husband had told her, what's the point of living so long? It's just a waste of money. Furthermore, he had forced her to choose between her own body and her daughter, making her give up on treatment while continuing to ask for money. All of this was written in this notebook. Explain what this means right now. I don't know anything about that. Besides, a diary like this isn't proof of anything, is it? My husband became defiant, leaning back in his chair with a confident attitude. You're right. This alone might not be decisive evidence. It could be dismissed as my mother's delusion. See? I told you so. As expected, you're a woman who understands, he said, nodding and laughing through his nose as if mocking me. Then how about this? I started a video on my smartphone and showed it to my husband. Pete, who had been smirking with a relaxed expression until now, was at a loss for words. How do you explain this? Don't just sit there silently, answer me. What was displayed was footage from a camera hidden in the living room of my mother's house. On the last page of my mother's diary, it was written, Pete's demands are escalating, and I'm feeling it's getting dangerous. If I can get video evidence, I'll take it and tell my daughter everything. It seems that my technophobe mother had bought a camera and asked an electronics store to install it for her. The video showed the two of them arguing over money lending, and then in the heat of the argument, my husband losing his temper and raising his hand against her, causing her to fall. After that, he panicked and carried her body towards the garden. When he returned to the living room alone, he took all the money from her wallet and even took her cell phone before fleeing. From that point on, the video only showed an empty living room. The culprit was my husband, Pete. I'm truly shocked that you would do something like this, but there's no way for you to escape now, I said, glaring at him with anger and contempt welling up from the bottom of my heart. However, he didn't flinch and instead started shouting. That damn old hag. Why did she have to leave something like this behind? Why did you extort money from my mother? Huh? Of course, it's because I have debt. It was to repay those. My husband was completely brazen, admitting it without any sign of remorse. Apparently, his irresponsible attitude towards money hadn't improved at all. Unable to stop spending beyond his means, he had accumulated debts. I had to contribute to our household expenses after getting married, but I also had debts to repay. I was troubled too, you know. This was also why he had used our joint savings without permission. You pretended to be responsible in front of me, but behind my back, you were doing such things. Well, I had to act like a decent husband, or you said you'd divorce me. If that happened, I wouldn't be able to squeeze money out of your mother, right? That old hag was surprisingly hoarding money. Being a single mother doesn't mean you're poor, you know. When my husband started going to check on my mother on my behalf, he had secretly looked at her bank book that happened to be lying around. My mother wasn't the type to live luxuriously, so she must have been saving bit by bit from her small salary for emergencies. My husband must have grinned when he saw the amount, thinking, I can use this. At first, she lent me money right away, but from the second time on, she started hesitating, saying something about treatment costs. So you use me as a shield to threaten her? That's so dirty. It's touching, isn't it? Saying her daughter's happiness is more important. Is this what they call a parent's love? He grinned at me, but his face was utterly detestable. My husband might not have any sense of guilt at all. Even so, you didn't have to take her life. Oh, that was just an accident. I didn't intend for that to happen, but when I hit her a bit too hard, she fell and wasn't breathing. I thought it would be trouble if she rotted inside the house, so I went out of my way to bury her in the soil. He spewed out words that made me wonder if he had any human feelings at all. Thinking about my mother's feelings, I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. However, I couldn't give up here. To clear my mother's regrets, I had to reveal the truth and turn him over to the police. So you were the one pretending to be my mother in those emails? Oh, yes. It was my way of consideration, you know. I thought you'd feel like you had more time with your mother. I don't need that kind of consideration. He had thrown away my mother's cell phone after I contacted him about finding her. There was no need to hold back anymore with this man. I'm going to report this to the police now. With all the evidence gathered, your crime will undoubtedly be judged. I wonder how many years you'll get. Hey, you're joking, right? I never intended to kill her in the first place. This was just a sad accident that happened. If that's the case, my mother might have been saved if you had called an ambulance right away. Your crime is grave for not doing that, and instead doing what you did. Wait a minute. Please. Not the police. We're husband and wife, aren't we? My husband suddenly changed his tune and started pleading with me. Did he really think I would choose not to report him in this situation? We're no longer husband and wife after you tormented my dear mother. We're getting a divorce. I declared our divorce and pushed away my clinging husband. He then slammed the table again and stood up. You don't mess with me. Pete seemed to have forgotten we were in a cafe and came at me with a loud voice. However, it ended abruptly as he grabbed my clothes. Several people in the cafe restrained him. Stop it. Let go of me. Allison, do something about these people, he cried out, begging me for help. Reflect deeply on what you've done and spend your life making amends. As I said this to him, I could hear police sirens in the distance. It seemed the cafe staff had called the police, and Pete was taken away by them. Our divorce was finalized, and through a lawyer, I claimed $30,000 in damages. My husband was arrested for this incident. His selfish crimes were severe, and he's likely to spend a considerable time in prison. I wonder if I've managed to clear some of my mother's regrets. I thought about this while looking up at the clear sky. From now on, I'm determined to live my life in a way that won't shame my mother in heaven. Story 2. Mom, I'm home. My daughter, who died 5 years ago, said from the garden. I couldn't believe my eyes. My daughter started crying and said, Actually, Dad. Mom, I'm home. Standing before me as I was working in the garden was my daughter, who should have died at the age of 6. 5 years ago, I was seriously injured in a car accident along with my daughter. I couldn't even get out of bed, let alone attend my daughter's funeral. That's why I couldn't say goodbye and was plunged into deep sorrow for a long time. I stood there dumbfounded, wondering if I was seeing a vision. As I was too shocked to speak, my grown daughter began to reveal a shocking truth. Actually, at that time, after hearing her story, I decided to send that person to hell. My husband, Ian, started a company after marrying me. When he first started the business, I was struggling to manage the mortgage and living expenses. Of course, I economized on food, clothing, and household goods wherever I could, supporting him with all my might. During that time, our daughter, Sophia, was born, and though it was tough, we spent happy days together. After about 4 years, my husband's business started to take off, and we gradually had a little more financial breathing room. It's all thanks to you. Thank you. I was genuinely happy to hear his words of gratitude, and I felt I could work even harder. My hobby at that time was gardening, and my daughter always helped me water the plants. Sophia was bright, honest, and a very lovely daughter. I was proud of her. The time we spent together in the garden under the warm sunlight was our special moment. However, that happiness didn't last long. I started to feel lonely at home around the time Sophia turned 6. My husband's spending habits became extravagant, and he started coming home late more often. Sometimes I could smell women's perfume on the suits he asked me to take to the dry cleaners. I tried to convince myself that he had to socialize with business partners, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. One day, after dropping my daughter off at kindergarten and catching my breath, I received a phone call from my husband. I forgot some documents I need for a meeting today. Bring them to the office right away. His voice sounded unusually flustered. Okay, where are the documents? They should be in the drawer of my desk in my room. It's a blue file. Hurry up and bring it. The call ended before I could even respond. I felt irritated by my husband's arrogant attitude. As his work got on track and his income increased, Ian changed. Until Sophia was about 2 years old, no matter how busy he was, he would take her to the park on weekends or play with her. Even on ordinary days, he would often buy clothes, stuffed animals, or toys to please our daughter. However, he gradually started going out on weekends with various excuses and stopped being involved in childcare altogether. Moreover, he began to say terrible things like, "Who do you think you're able to live thanks to?" Or, "If you have any objections, say them after you earn as much as I do." I found the documents in my husband's desk drawer and headed to Ian's company. Later, I went out to buy a school bag for Sophia, who was about to start elementary school. She was so adorable, looking at various colorful bags and asking, "Mom, how about this one? Does it suit me?" I couldn't help but smile, forgetting all my complaints about my husband as we spent a lovely time together. The light purple bag with the lace-like pattern was cute, but the pink bag with the embroidery was lovely too. On the bus ride home, I smiled at the sight of my daughter sitting with her arms folded, pondering with a serious face. It's hard to decide, isn't it? We still have time, so you can think about it carefully. Yes, I'll find my absolute favorite. After that, we got off the bus at our usual stop, and when we were about 5 minutes away from home, I suddenly heard the loud engine sound of a sports car in the distance. When I turned around, I saw a car speeding towards us. I couldn't even scream. All I could do was instinctively hug Sophia. I heard the screams of passers-by, and the next moment, I felt an incredible impact on my body before losing consciousness. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. I saw a white ceiling, and it took me a while to understand that I wasn't at home. We were looking at bags on our way home. Then a car came towards us, and then my whole body ached just from breathing, and I could barely move, but all I could think about was my daughter's safety. I pressed the nurse call button, enduring the pain, and soon a nurse and doctor came running, saying they would contact Ian. Apparently, I had been asleep for 3 days. 30 minutes later, when he arrived at the hospital and entered the room, he looked at me and muttered, "So you're alive," then let out a sigh. "What about Sophia?" I asked my husband in a hoarse voice as he came to the side of the bed. By the time I got to the hospital, she was already ready. He told me without making eye contact, seeming to look off into the distance. When the ambulance arrived, my daughter was already in critical condition and treatment didn't help in time. No, although I understood the meaning of his words, I was too shocked to even cry. It didn't feel real, as if I was having a bad dream. And while I was in the hospital, Sophia's funeral had already been completed. A month after the accident, when I was discharged and returned home, the house was eerily quiet. There was only a smiling photo of Sophia in the living room. Unable to see my daughter's final moments, I was consumed by deep despair. In the depths of my despair, I couldn't do anything, spent my days just crying. I even lost all interest in gardening, which I had loved so much. Why don't you try to look forward already? Sophia won't rest in peace if you keep being like this. My husband's words, sounding exasperated, reached my ears, but I couldn't accept them. I couldn't even imagine how to live a life without my daughter. That's impossible. No matter what I did or where I went, the hole in my heart couldn't be filled. I kept remembering how my daughter used to help me with cooking, folding laundry, and watering the garden, and tears would involuntarily flow. Perhaps disgusted by my state, Ian started spending more nights away from home. About 5 years after losing my daughter, my heart had recovered enough to engage in my old hobby of gardening. Who would have thought that nurturing plants could be so healing? Sophia used to help me water the plants too. There were many moments in my daily life when I would suddenly remember Sophia, but I no longer cried uncontrollably like before. I was gradually overcoming the past and starting to think about the future. On one such day, just before noon, I was out in the garden taking advantage of the good weather, rearranging flower pots while considering different combinations. That's when I heard a sound from the door connecting the parking lot to the garden. Who could it be? When I looked up, there stood my daughter, who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. She had grown into a young woman, but I could still see traces of the Sophia I remembered. "Mom, I'm home," she called out hesitantly, and I was too surprised to say anything. I just stared at her in amazement, unable to move, wondering if I was dreaming or seeing some kind of illusion. "How?" That was all I could say after a while. "Mom, listen carefully." Actually, the shocking truth my daughter told me filled me with a rage I had never felt before. Everything had been orchestrated by Ian. Unforgivable. I decided to send my husband to hell. From now on, I would live for Sophia's happiness. I vowed not to cry anymore. A few weeks later, Ian was unusually spending his day off at home. "Honey, can I talk to you for a moment? Can you explain this?" I placed several photos in front of him as he was lounging on the sofa watching TV. They showed my husband entering various houses and supermarkets with an unknown woman. "What are these?" "I took them while following you. I've been suspecting you of having an affair because you've been coming home late or not coming home at all more often." He picked up the photos and laughed scornfully. "Since Sophia died, you've been moping around with a gloomy face every day, right? It's only natural not to want to come home when I see that." He tapped the photos with his finger and said brazenly, "This house is a place I'm renting near the office for work. That woman is the housekeeper, so of course she's going in and out of the house." "I see." Seeing my meek attitude, my husband grinned confidently. "Those photos don't prove anything." He crossed his arms and leaned back, seemingly emboldened. "Well, that might be fine, but..." Just as my husband looked puzzled by my words, my cell phone rang loudly. I answered the phone without any explanation. "What now? Is this conversation over?" As he spoke irritably, I showed him the video call screen, and his face changed instantly. "Hello, Mom. I had asked Sophia to call me." "Huh? What's going on?" Actually, when she came to visit me, she had a smartphone hanging around her neck. She told me that Ian was managing her cell phone, so I came up with the idea of registering Sophia's and my numbers under fake names in each other's phones without Ian knowing and asked for my daughter's cooperation. "I might have forgiven you for the affair, but I can't forgive you for lying about Sophia's death. I want you to confess everything." Faced with the intensity of my daughter on the phone and me, my husband involuntarily stood up and stepped back. I could see his eyes darting around, clearly agitated. What Sophia had told me that day was unforgivable. When we had the accident, I was severely injured and taken to a hospital with an intensive care unit. But due to capacity issues, my daughter was taken to a different hospital. Ian had lied to me saying our daughter died, and to Sophia saying Mom died. Furthermore, around the time our daughter was discharged, my husband rented a house in the neighboring town, saying, "It's better to be closer to the hospital for Sophia's rehabilitation." Sophia told me that soon after, a woman started living with you. "You told Sophia she was an acquaintance of yours who would take care of her, didn't you?" As I questioned him, sweat began to bead on my husband's forehead. "That's right. I thought Sophia would be lonely if she was alone for long periods, so I hired that housekeeper in the photo." "But that's strange, isn't it, Sophia?" I asked, looking at my daughter's face through the screen. "Yes, because Stephanie, who Dad brought as a housekeeper, says mean things like she's going to marry Dad and that I'm in the way." Apparently, Stephanie, who started living in the same house, always came home late at night and was asleep when Sophia left for school. My daughter would prepare her own breakfast and go to school, and by the time she returned home, Stephanie would leave for work. Stephanie didn't do any housework at all, and although Ian sometimes brought food home, Sophia ended up doing most of the housework herself. When Dad wasn't around, Stephanie told me to tell you to get a divorce quickly. That's when I started to think that maybe Mom was still alive. My daughter had come to check on me by herself, taking trains and buses, asking passersby for directions along the way. I don't want to live with that person anymore. As Sophia pleaded with a face on the verge of tears, my heart ached. Dad has been lying to me all this time, saying that Mom was dead. I can't trust Dad anymore. Thinking about how much she must have endured living like that, I felt that I absolutely couldn't let her suffer anymore. Pushed by my daughter's words, I took out more photos. I have these too. They showed Ian and Stephanie walking arm in arm, entering pubs and hotels. The The stores in those photos were the same ones I had seen on a business card that fell out of his suit jacket pocket when he once asked me to take it to the dry cleaners. Stephanie works at this store, doesn't she? My husband's eyes widened at those words. You've been betraying me and having an affair since 5 years ago. I glared at Ian as I said this. His face turned red as he realized his lies had been exposed, and he started trembling. Suddenly, he slammed his fist on the table and crumpled the photos in his hand. Startled by his sudden action, I stiffened, and my enraged husband threw the photos at me. Call the police. Feeling threatened by Ian's behavior, I pleaded with my daughter and ended the call. What? Don't be ridiculous. Everything's ruined because you two are alive, my husband, now in a frenzy, approached me with a look I had never seen before. I was supposed to send you both to the other world and live happily with Stephanie. Stunned by his unexpected words, I was at a loss. It turns out that the accident Sophia and I had been in was not an unfortunate incident. Apparently, he had hired an acquaintance of Stephanie's to run us over with a car. When we were seriously injured, but our lives were not in danger, he was forced to change his plans and ended up living a double life between our home and his mistress's house. Of course, the story about having completed our daughter's funeral was also a lie. If you two had died in the accident as planned, I would have gained sympathy from everyone around me and even collected the insurance money. My husband's face contorted as he clenched his fists. Too bad your plan didn't work out. I can't live with you anymore. I've already consulted a lawyer, and you're going to pay alimony and child support properly. Enraged by my words, he actually picked up the remote control from the table and threw it at me. As I dodged it, the remote hit the wall with a loud bang. Just as Ian shouted, "Don't run away," and grabbed a vase, we heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Suddenly panicked, he looked out the window and started to get flustered. Did you really call the police? Is Sophia planning to turn me in? Ian's face turned pale. Please don't do this. Don't do this. I'll lose everything. My company, Stephanie, everything. Think hard about what you've done while you're in prison. Disgusted that even in this situation he didn't mention my or our daughter's names, I coldly declared. As footsteps approached and police officers entered the room, a panicked Ian actually threw the vase he was holding at them. Stay back. Stop. The officers skillfully restrained my husband, who resisted violently until the very end. Thanks to our daughter's report and her actions, he was taken away. After that, I divorced Ian and received a lump sum payment of $300,000 for alimony, child support, and division of property. His company was in an uproar. The day after his sudden arrest, I received numerous phone calls, but I simply stated the facts calmly. Ian ended up losing everything, his family and his social credibility. He must be regretting his actions now, but even if he realizes it, it's too late to make amends. It's already over for him. I moved with my daughter and started a new job, beginning our new life. I feel happy every day knowing that my daughter is there when I come home. We're having macaroni and cheese for dinner tonight, I said as I set the table, and Sophia beamed, saying, "Yay." Such ordinary conversations and my daughter's smile are my greatest treasures. Story 3. My 6-year-old son, who has a mysterious ability, met his aunt for the first time and declared, "She's hiding my brother." When we searched her garage, we found our son who had been missing for a year. And then, I'm Sarah Johnson. I live with my husband, Michael, and our 2 sons in a leafy suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota. At 38, I work as a teacher at a local elementary school, while Michael, 40, is a programmer at an IT company. Our home is a 2-story house with a spacious backyard. On weekends, we cherish family time, having barbecues in the backyard or enjoying picnics in the nearby park. Living this way, I realize we're leading a typical middle-class American life. Our eldest son, Ethan, is a bright and lively 6-year-old. He's popular at school, and friends often come over to play. But Ethan has a special ability that other children don't. Sometimes he can read people's minds or foresee future events. At first, we thought Ethan's predictions were just coincidences or products of a child's imagination, but an incident when he was 4 years old dramatically changed our thinking. One day, Ethan suddenly burst into tears, saying, "Grandpa's going to heaven." At the time, we thought it was just childish nonsense. However, 3 days later, my father passed away from a sudden heart attack. Since then, we've paid close attention to Ethan's words. Our younger son, Noah, is 4 years old and quite different from Ethan. He's quiet and calm, loving to read books or play with Legos, often engrossed in solid AR play. The brothers get along well, and I'm grateful that Ethan often looks after Noah. Our family lives with mutual care and support. Sometimes we struggle to balance work and family, but Michael and I have overcome challenges together. Watching our children grow is our greatest happiness. No one could have predicted that our peaceful days would change completely after that fateful day. One Saturday afternoon, Michael and I were doing yard work in the backyard. Ethan and Noah were playing inside the house as usual. Suddenly, Ethan came running out to the yard, crying, "Mom, Dad, Noah's gone." At first, we thought he might be hiding somewhere in the house, but after searching everywhere, we couldn't find Noah. Anxiety began to spread in my chest. Michael and I split up to search the neighborhood, but Noah was nowhere to be found. Panicking, I called 911. The police arrived and took details about Noah's disappearance. A search began immediately, with neighbors helping out. Hours passed, but Noah wasn't found. The police started a wider search and asked local media for cooperation. Our entire community mobilized to search for Noah. As night fell, I held a sobbing Ethan, praying for Noah's safety. Michael tried desperately to stay calm, but fear and anxiety were visible in his eyes. "Noah, please be safe," I repeated in my heart. Even the next day, Noah wasn't found. The search continued with the FBI joining the investigation. We held a press conference, appealing to the public for information about Noah. "Has anyone seen our son, Noah? He's 4 years old, with brown hair and blue eyes. He was last seen wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans. Please, any information, no matter how small, could help us find our son." My voice was shaking, but I managed to get the words out. Michael held my shoulder, supporting me. The community support was heartening. Neighbors brought food and looked after Ethan. The church community held gatherings to pray for Noah's safety. However, as days passed, we felt hope fading. The police reports were always the same, no new leads. Ethan started crying at night, saying he could sense Noah was scared. We tried to comfort him, but Ethan's words filled me with fear, too. A week passed, then a month, and then a year. The search was scaled back and media interest waned, but we never gave up. We kept putting up Noah's pictures around town and spreading information on social media. Every night, I went to Noah's room, hugging his stuffed animals and praying. "Noah, Mommy will keep looking for you. We'll find you, I promise." Our family changed a lot over this year. We smiled less and talked less. Ethan became less active, and his teacher told us he had become quieter at school. Michael and my relationship was also strained by stress. We didn't blame each other, but grief and anxiety seemed to build a wall between us. Still, we couldn't give up hope. We believed Noah was safe and kept waiting for the day he would return. About a year after Noah's disappearance, Michael's sister, Jessica, came to visit us for the first time in a while. She hadn't shown her face much, probably sensing our grief. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, Jessica was standing there. "Sarah, it's been a while. How are you?" She smiled gently at me. "Jessica, thank you for coming. Please come in." I invited her inside. In the living room, Ethan was watching TV. He looked a bit confused when he saw his aunt, but quickly said, "Hello, Aunt Jessica." As Jessica approached Ethan to hug him, his expression suddenly changed, and he shouted, "This woman is hiding my brother." Those words froze me, Jessica, and Michael, who had just entered the room. Ethan was trembling, standing behind me as if hiding. "Ethan, what are you saying?" I asked, trying to stay calm despite my shock. "Noah is at Aunt's house. I can tell," Ethan answered with a serious expression. Jessica's face turned red. "What are you saying? That's impossible," she raised her voice. The atmosphere in the room instantly became tense. Michael looked confused, glancing back and forth between his sister, Jessica, and son, Ethan. I felt my mind go blank, remembering Ethan's strange ability. I struggled with whether to believe his words or think rationally. Michael sighed deeply and said, "Jessica, I'm sorry, but could you go home today? We need to talk as a family." Jessica was clearly upset, but nodded and left. After she was gone, we were left in a heavy silence. "Michael, what should we do?" I asked my husband, seeking help. Michael ruffled his hair as he answered honestly, "I don't know. Should we believe Ethan's words?" We felt the complexity of American family relationships acutely. The difficulty of doubting blood relatives, the heart wavering between a child's intuition and adult rationality. There were no easy answers to these issues. Ethan looked at us with tears in his eyes. "Mom, Dad, please believe me. I'm not lying." I hugged Ethan and said, "We understand, honey. Mom and Dad will think about this seriously." That night, after the children were asleep, Michael and I talked for a long time. We couldn't completely ignore Ethan's words. However, we also wanted to avoid unjustly suspecting family. "Sarah, if Ethan's words are true," Michael's voice was shaking. "But to suspect Jessica without evidence." I couldn't hide my hesitation either. We also considered American laws and social norms, the danger of suspecting an innocent person, but at the same time, the idea that children's safety should be the top priority. In the end, we didn't reach a conclusion that night, but we knew we needed to take some action. The next morning, we made a decision. Directly confronting Jessica was too risky. We decided to start by investigating discreetly. Michael took a day off work to look around Jessica's house. I decided to casually ask around the neighborhood. Before leaving the house, we told Ethan, "We believe your words, but we need to act carefully. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, looking relieved. "Yes, I understand. I hope we can help Noah." Our investigation began. Between family bonds and truth, we set out to find answers. After several days of investigation, we made a decision. We would visit Jessica's house directly and search her garage. In American suburbs, it's common for houses to have large garages. Jessica's house was no exception. On a Saturday afternoon, Michael and I headed to Jessica's house, feeling my stomach knot with tension. I rang the doorbell. After a while, Jessica appeared with a confused expression. "Sarah? Michael? What's wrong?" Her voice held a note of caution. Michael took a deep breath and said, "Jessica, can we see your garage?" The color drained from Jessica's face. "Huh? What?" "We're concerned about what Ethan said," I added in a small voice. Jessica was clearly flustered, but perhaps aware of the neighbor's eyes. She reluctantly invited us in. In American suburbs, neighborly relations are important. People generally try to avoid trouble. Entering the living room, Jessica tried desperately to appear calm. "The garage is just a pile of junk. It's not worth seeing." However, Michael didn't back down. "Still, I'd like to check." Jessica hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. "All right, but there's really nothing there." Led by Jessica, we went through the kitchen towards the garage. As the door opened, my heart was pounding fiercely. The moment we stepped into the garage, musty air hit our noses. Cars, gardening tools, and old furniture were scattered about. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary garage, but Michael's sharp eyes caught something. "That door." He pointed to a small door in the back wall. Jessica hurriedly began to make excuses. "That's just a storage room. There's nothing." Michael cut off her words and started walking towards the door. Jessica desperately tried to stop him, but Michael's determination was firm. "Open it, Jessica." Michael's voice was shaking, but there was a strong will behind it. Jessica, looking like she was about to cry, hesitated for a while but eventually took a key out of her pocket. The sound of the key turning seemed unusually loud. As the door opened, a dark space spread before us. Just as Michael was about to enter, we heard a faint sound. "Is someone there?" I called out in a trembling voice. Then a small shadow moved from the back. Michael took out a flashlight, and when he shone it, there was Noah, looking thin and frail. "Noah!" I cried out, rushing towards him without thinking. Noel was frightened at first, but when he recognized our faces, he burst into tears. "Mama! Papa!" We hugged Noah tightly. After a year apart, we were speechless. The tears wouldn't stop. Meanwhile, Jessica had collapsed onto the floor. I'm sorry," she kept repeating, sobbing. The air in the room was tense. The desire to protect Noah, anger towards Jessica, and fear of the gravity of the situation were all mixed together. Michael sighed deeply and took out his cell phone. "We have to call the police." At those words, Jessica cried even harder, but we had no choice. Holding Noah, I was overwhelmed by complex emotions, relief that my son was safe, anger and sadness towards Jessica, and anxiety about the difficulties ahead. "It's okay, Noah. You're safe now." I gently stroked Noah's head. Noah nodded slightly and clung to me. His body was thin and trembling, but he was alive. While Michael called the police, we moved from the garage to the living room. Jessica followed, looking completely broken. The time until the police arrived felt like an eternity. We continued to hold our son, sensing the long road ahead of us. After the police arrived and we explained the situation, we learned about Jessica's motives. As she responded to police questioning, she began to speak tearfully. I wanted a child, but I'm infertile. We gasped at Jessica's confession. In American society, many couples struggle with infertility. Despite advances in medical technology, the emotional and financial burden is significant, and many people suffer. Jessica continued. Even after treatment, it didn't work, but everyone around me had children. We could feel the weight of social pressure in her words. When I saw Noah, impulsively, she covered her face and began to cry violently. Listening to this confession, I keenly felt the challenges of mental health in American society. With appropriate counseling and support, perhaps this tragedy could have been prevented. Michael sighed deeply. Jessica, why didn't you talk to us? She answered in a small voice. I was ashamed. I couldn't tell anyone. This incident highlighted the importance of family communication and the need for social understanding of mental health issues. After Noah's rescue, we headed to the hospital. While he was being examined by doctors, people from the community gathered in the hospital lobby. Voices of joy over Noah's safety could be heard everywhere. Thank goodness. It's a miracle. Even strangers were shedding tears. I strongly felt the unity of the American community. It's in difficult times that people support each other. The doctor informed us that Noah's physical condition was relatively good, but psychological care would be necessary. Professional support is crucial, the doctor emphasized. When we returned home, neighbors brought food and necessary supplies. Church groups also visited, offering spiritual support. Ethan was overjoyed to be reunited with his brother, jumping up and down. Noah, I'll never let you go again, he said, hugging him tightly. It warmed my heart. Through this experience, I deeply felt the importance of professional care and community support. I realized that while a single family might not be able to overcome such difficulties alone, with help from others, we can overcome anything. Several weeks after the incident, our family was gradually trying to return to normality. However, the impact of the trauma was significant, especially with Noah's continued night terrors. During this time, Jessica's trial was also progressing. The court, considering her mental state, ordered treatment in a mental health facility rather than prison. While we had mixed feelings, we tried to understand that this was the best path for Jessica. In America, family therapy and counseling are common in such situations. We too began our journey of recovery, guided by professional advice. Once a week, the whole family visits a therapist. There, we put our feelings into words and understand each other's pain. When Ethan confided, I want to cry when Noah cries, I felt the depth of our family bond. We also had individual counseling sessions. Noah gradually regained his smile through play therapy. Michael and I also received couples counseling. By frankly discussing our emotional ups and downs and feelings for each other after the incident, our relationship deepened. Sarah, I'm so glad you're here, Michael said, and I couldn't stop my tears. The American health insurance system was also a great support, allowing us to continue these treatments consistently. There were tough days, but as we all moved forward together as a family, smiles gradually increased. Now, 5 years after the incident, our family has grown significantly. Noah is happily attending elementary school and even excelling on the soccer team. Although he occasionally fears memories of the past, he overcomes them with family support. Ethan has grown into a good big brother who protects his younger sibling, and he's become a trusted figure at school. His special ability is now an important element that deepens our family bond. Michael and my relationship has become even stronger than before. Overcoming difficulty has deepened our trust and love for each other. Our connection with the community has also strengthened. Interactions with neighbors have become an essential part of our lives. We have more opportunities to express our gratitude, saying thanks to all of you. Our family has become stronger. We also realize the importance of America's social support system. Ongoing counseling and participation in support groups continue to aid our recovery. Through this experience, we've learned the importance of family bonds and hope. We believe that with love and mutual support, any difficulty can be overcome. With this belief, we continue to live each day with smiles on our faces. Story 4. My 3-year-old granddaughter died of an illness. The night before the funeral, I heard a voice from her coffin saying, "Help me." I opened the coffin to find her bound in chains. As I began to uncover the truth, "Help." On the day before my grandchild's funeral, a faint voice came from somewhere. Huh? What? As I listened closely, it seemed to be coming from inside the coffin. Trembling with fear, I opened the lid of the coffin, and there was my 3-year-old granddaughter, who was supposed to have died from illness, tied up with chains. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Grandma, you know. As unbelievable facts were told from my granddaughter's mouth, I was at a loss for words. Unforgivable. How could this happen? The anger welling up inside me exceeded my limits of patience. I lost my husband in an accident when I was 38. As a widow, I devoted all my energy to raising my son, Timothy, who was 13 at the time. When Timothy was 34, he married a woman named Sarah. "You can finally relax now," my friends all said, acknowledging my years of hard work. Timothy and Sarah lived about a 30-minute drive from my house, maintaining a comfortable distance. Soon after their marriage, we found out she was pregnant, and I was eagerly awaiting the birth of my first grandchild. When Sarah was in her 3rd trimester, I visited their house to share some vegetables. We weren't sure about the baby's gender for a while, but it turns out it's a girl, Timothy said. "Oh, how exciting." I replied, "Yes, but I really wanted a boy," he sighed. The couple seemed visibly disappointed that the baby wasn't their desired gender. "With a girl, you'll have the joy of choosing cute outfits," I said, trying to cheer them up. Of course, I thought the gender didn't matter as long as the baby was born healthy, but I was trying to boost their spirits. However, they were so shocked they didn't respond at all. Still, I thought once they saw their adorable newborn, they'd forget they ever felt that way. A few months later, my granddaughter was born safely. They named her Olivia, and she was the sweetest little girl. I truly understood the saying, "Too precious for words." I visited my son and daughter-in-law whenever I could to see my granddaughter. However, as I observed the two of them, something bothered me. Even when Olivia cried for a long time, they hardly paid attention to her. "Oh my, what's wrong?" I'd say, reaching out to pick her up, but Sarah would glare at me. "Mother-in-law, don't do that. She'll get used to being held." But isn't it pitiful to leave her crying like this? I was trying to help Sarah feel a bit more relaxed, but it seemed that wasn't the right thing to do. Timothy chimed in with a bitter expression. "She's just fussy because she's sleepy. It's trendy now to teach them to sleep on their own from an early age." They both looked annoyed that I had voiced my opinion. "I suppose child rearing has changed a lot since my day," I said, deciding to step back and observe for a while. However, as Olivia grew, my doubts about my son and daughter-in-law's parenting only increased. When I visited their house, Olivia was always wearing ill-fitting clothes, and she would eagerly devour the snacks I brought as if she were starving. Are they really taking proper care of her? Worried, I tried to talk to my son about it, hoping to offer some help. "Stop nagging. Don't interfere with how we raise our child," Timothy shouted, refusing to listen. What's more, every time I said something, he started treating Olivia roughly. Witnessing such behavior, I found myself unable to speak up and decided to keep quiet. A little while later, around Olivia's 3rd birthday, Sarah became pregnant with their 2nd child. While I was babysitting Olivia during their prenatal checkup, they returned home overjoyed. They had found out their next child would be a boy. "Yes, I'm so excited," Timothy exclaimed. "That's wonderful news. Olivia, you're going to have a little brother." I said, "Yes, I can't wait to meet my brother." Olivia cheered. Seeing Timothy and Sarah's happiness and Olivia's joy, I felt relieved. Maybe they're slowly becoming a real family, I thought. However, my relief was short-lived. Around this time, Olivia started falling ill frequently. Several times I'd receive a message from Timothy the day before a planned visit saying, "Tomorrow won't work." When I asked why, he'd say Olivia wasn't feeling well. Even when I offered to visit and check on her, they refused. After persistent pleading, they finally allowed me to come over, and I rushed to their house. When I finally saw Olivia after a long time, she looked emaciated. Doesn't she need to be hospitalized? If she's at home, it can't be that serious, right? I asked. Timothy hung his head, covering his face with his hands. "We thought it would be better for her to spend her remaining time at home," he said, his voice trembling. Hearing my son speak like this, I knew something was terribly wrong. "What's her diagnosis? It must be quite serious, right?" I was filled with disbelief and a desire to take Olivia's place if I could. After that, I visited Olivia as often as time allowed, but my son and daughter-in-law gradually prevented me from seeing her, saying it might tire her out. This went on for about a month, and then it happened. Suddenly, Olivia has passed away. Timothy informed me, and my world went dark. She was only 3 years old. She had so many joyful experiences ahead of her. Thinking about how I couldn't do anything for her, I broke down in tears. I was also worried about Sarah, who was in her final month of pregnancy, and my heart ached imagining how devastated she must be. When I went to my son's house, funeral preparations were underway, and Olivia was already in her coffin. As I approached the coffin, wanting to see Olivia's face, Timothy, who had just entered the room, stopped me. "No, don't open it," he said. "She went through tough treatments, so her body is in bad shape. I don't want you to see her like that." That bad. I imagined a truly horrific end, unable to even see Olivia's face. Though part of me couldn't accept it, I tried to tell myself that Olivia would always be in my heart. Changing the subject, I asked my son if there was anything I could help with, but he said, "We're fine for now," so I decided to go home for the time being. The next day I visited their house again. It was the day of the funeral, but strangely, no one else had arrived yet besides me. "Who else is coming?" I asked. "No one. We want to send her off quietly, just as family," Timothy replied. "Sarah's parents are working overseas. We contacted them, but they said they couldn't make it in time for the funeral, though they'd definitely come later." I understood it was sudden, and it might be difficult for them to return at such short notice. "We'll give Olivia a proper send-off, even if it's just us," I thought. I was standing in front of the coffin, reminiscing about the time I spent with Olivia, when Timothy's phone rang, and he stepped outside to take the call. At that moment, I heard a faint "help me" coming from somewhere. Listening closely, it seemed to be coming from inside the coffin. Trembling, I opened the lid, and to my shock, there was Olivia, who was supposed to be dead, bound in chains and pleading for help. "Olivia, what on earth is going on?" I was confused by this sudden turn of events, but I knew without a doubt that my son and daughter-in-law were involved. I quickly helped Olivia out and hid her in the closet, telling her, "Wait here for just a bit, okay? Sarah's gone into labor." Timothy came running back, his voice full of excitement. "I'm taking Sarah to the hospital now, so you should go home," he said, gathering his wife's belongings and tidying himself up. "What about Olivia's funeral?" I asked. "That's not important right now. The boy who's about to be born is what matters." He said this as if it were the most natural thing in the world, without even a change in his expression. "But it's sad to leave Olivia alone. I'll stay here and keep watch," I suggested, feeling it would be more convenient to remain in the house. "Just because we're not here doesn't mean you can look inside the coffin. It would make Olivia sad," Timothy warned, looking thoughtful for a moment before hurrying out of the room. "Even if you tell me not to look, it's already too late," I thought to myself. After confirming that Timothy and Sarah had left, I rushed to the closet where Olivia was waiting. "Olivia, it's all right now," I said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so glad you're alive." After that, I heard an unbelievable story from her. As I had suspected, Timothy and Sarah were indeed the culprits. I will never forgive them. Unable to contain my anger, I decided to punish them and began preparing to corner the two of them. The next day, I received a call from my son. "A healthy baby boy was born," he announced in an elated voice. "Congratulations. We must celebrate." "I'll come to the hospital later," I replied. About 3 hours after the call, I visited Sarah's hospital room. "Look, Mom, it's our long-awaited son. Isn't he cute?" Timothy said excitedly as soon as I entered the room, holding up his newborn son. He and Sarah exchanged glances, smiling happily at each other. "You won't be smiling for long," I thought to myself. When I asked them about Olivia's funeral, their expressions changed instantly. "Oh, we're busy with the new baby, so we decided to just cremate her without a funeral. We'll let you know when it's all done," Timothy answered dismissively, as if it were a bothersome task. Now it's time for their punishment to begin. I gave a signal behind my back, and Olivia ran towards the newborn baby. "Wow, he's so cute. This is my little brother, right?" Seeing this, my son and his wife were visibly shocked, looking back and forth between Olivia and me. "Oh my, Olivia." I pretended to be surprised by her appearance. "You opened the coffin, didn't I tell you not to?" Timothy confronted me, his tone harsh. I glared back at him. How could you chain her up and lock her in a coffin? That's despicable. Huh? That's none of your business, is it? I explained how I discovered Olivia when I opened the coffin lid. Olivia's mouth was covered with cloth, but it had slipped a bit, allowing her to call for help. Just imagine how scared Olivia must have been, unable to move in that dark box. As I started to say this, my son suddenly hugged Olivia tightly. You came back to life. That's great, isn't it, Sarah? Yes, it really is. They were putting on an exaggerated act, thinking they could fool me. Olivia, can you tell me why you were in that box? I asked my granddaughter with a gentle smile. Well, Daddy and Mommy wrapped me up tight. Then they said a devil was coming, so I had to wait there. Olivia explained, stumbling over her words but trying her best. She's saying this, but can you explain what it means? I asked. Timothy had lost his earlier bravado and became less talkative. Not wanting Olivia to see me corner her parents, I beckoned her and said, I need to have an important talk with your parents now. Can you wait in the hallway with my friend? Okay. Okay. I understand, she replied. I had asked a friend to come along and help me with this situation. After confirming that Olivia had left the room, I slowly turned to face Timothy and Sarah. Now, I need you to explain everything clearly, I said. Unable to withstand my piercing gaze, they quickly averted their eyes. You can't believe what a child says. That's right. She's only 3 years old. Her memory can't be trusted. They desperately tried to deny their actions, refusing to admit what they had done. I took out a notebook from my bag and held it out to them. But what's written here is true, isn't it? Timothy's voice cracked as he asked, How did you? This notebook contained details of their plan. Shall I read it aloud? The funeral is fake, meant to deceive Mom. Further down, it was written that if Olivia died, they expected to receive financial aid for funeral expenses. I had found this while searching their room after they had rushed to the hospital when Sarah went into labor. It's the worst to snoop around someone else's house, but that's just notes I took about an interesting mystery drama I saw on TV the other day, my son declared boldly, snatching the notebook from me. He looked triumphant, but of course, this wasn't the end. Then what about this? I said, pulling out another document from my bag and thrusting it at Timothy. What's this all about? He demanded. It was Olivia's medical report. When I rescued Olivia and hugged her, she winced in pain, saying, It hurts. When I lifted her clothes to check, I saw several bruises on her body. Suspecting my son and daughter-in-law of mistreating her, I immediately took her to the hospital. The doctor told me, this child has been regularly subjected to physical abuse, and her nutritional state is poor. Is she not being fed properly? He then provided me with this medical report. So that's why Olivia devoured the food so eagerly when I brought some to your house before, I said. They kept their heads down, not answering. What's going on? Why are you doing this? I pressed further. At first, my son wouldn't even meet my eyes, but then he sat down in a chair, manspreading. We wanted a boy, but she was born a girl. That's the problem, he blurted out. Children are precious gifts. I said, no way. Girls are useless, aren't they? Timothy started talking nonstop, as if he had given up trying to hide anything. He explained that once they found out their second child was a boy, they decided they no longer needed Olivia. However, they thought it would be suspicious if she suddenly disappeared, so they came up with the plan to pretend she was sick and eventually claim she had died. Well, we haven't been feeding her properly lately, so we thought she'd eventually just weaken and die on her own. My son said this with a smirk, casually admitting to such a terrible thing without any hesitation. There was one thing I couldn't understand. Even though you say that, you didn't actually kill her, isn't that because deep down as parents you truly love Olivia? I asked. Timothy and Sarah looked at each other, then burst out laughing. Love? There's no such thing. If she died, we'd lose the child support payments, and our income would decrease, right? That's right. The only one we want to love is this son, Sarah said lovingly, stroking the baby's head she was holding. At that moment, I realized my anger had reached its peak. If that's the case, there was no need to chain her up and put her in a coffin. I shouted, suppressing the urge to slap them both. However, my anger didn't seem to affect them at all. But that wouldn't create the right atmosphere, you know? Besides, kids can do unexpected things, so we thought it would be safer to keep her restrained and locked in the coffin, my son said matter-of-factly. My body trembled with rage at his nonchalant attitude. Also, you always come to our house and dote on Olivia, so we were worried she might tell you what we've been doing to her someday, Timothy continued. So that's why you pretended Olivia was dead. You thought I wouldn't come around anymore. I asked. Bingo, Timothy said with a grin. Now that we have our boy, you can have Olivia if you want her, he added. That's right. We don't need her anymore, so do whatever you like with her, Sarah chimed in. They were treating Olivia like an object, and worse, they seemed to be enjoying it. Before I knew it, I had grabbed my son by the collar. Want to fight? I won't go easy on you just because you're my mother, Timothy said provocatively, but I realized that if I gave in to this, I'd be no better than them. So I let go of my son and glared at them both. I'll raise Olivia and your newborn son myself, I declared. What? Are you crazy? We're not giving up our son. No way, they shouted angrily. It was time to deliver the final blow of my punishment. I've already reported this incident to the police and Child Protective Services. You should be prepared for how the authorities will judge parents who abuse their children, I said. As soon as I said this, Sarah grabbed Timothy's arm and kept shaking it, pleading, "What are we going to do?" over and over, but Timothy just stood there dumbfounded, unable to answer. I think the police might be arriving here soon, I added. Wait a minute. What if they really take our son away? What should we do? Timothy asked. That's not my problem. You brought this on yourselves. I replied coldly. We'll take good care of Olivia from now on. So please tell them your report was a mistake. They begged, bowing their heads to me as if I could believe that. I said, pushing them away. They muttered, "What should we do?" and slumped down where they stood. After that, Timothy and Sarah were arrested, and the children were temporarily placed in protective custody. The incident was widely reported in the news and weekly magazines with my son and daughter-in-law's names and faces exposed. Even after they're released from prison, they'll likely live the rest of their lives being pointed at and whispered about. As for me, I ended up taking in and raising both grandchildren. With another precious little one added to my life, I can't stop smiling. My friends tell me, "You look so youthful these days." Perhaps it's because I have a new purpose in life. I'm not entirely displeased with the compliment. Olivia is a great help around the house, and I'm truly grateful for her. I'm determined to stay healthy and energetic so I can watch my grandchildren grow up. That's what I'm focusing on now. Story 5. My daughter-in-law always left her 10-year-old son with me. One day, he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. My daughter-in-law yelled, "Get out. You tried to kill my son." But the doctor's words changed everything. I'm Barbara Johnson, a 62-year-old former elementary school teacher. Looking out the window of my cozy home in the suburbs of New York, I can see the autumn leaves glowing golden. It reminds me of the many seasons I've witnessed in this house. It's been 2 years since my husband, Robert, passed away. Although I'm financially comfortable, there's an emptiness in my heart that seems impossible to fill. As I sip my morning coffee, I think about my only son, Michael. At 35, he's become a successful lawyer, making us parents proud. I can't help but smile as I remember his college graduation day. The image of Michael walking proudly in his black gown is as vivid as if it were yesterday. Now, Michael has a happy family of his own. Jessica, whom he married 5 years ago, is a beautiful 30-year-old woman who works part-time as a model. At first, she seemed a bit difficult, but we gradually warmed up to each other. Still, I sometimes find myself perplexed by her flashy lifestyle and occasional cold attitude. 2 years after their marriage, Michael and Jessica had Tommy, my grandson, now 10 years old. He's become the light of my life. Tommy is a curious and intelligent child who seems to genuinely enjoy spending time with me. Seeing his smile warms my heart and eases my loneliness a bit. Whenever Tommy comes to my house, he always begs me to read him old picture books. When he says, "Grandma, read Winnie the Pooh again," I simply can't refuse. Reading the story and watching Tommy's eyes light up is my greatest joy. However, lately something's been bothering me. Jessica has been suddenly dropping Tommy off more frequently. She leaves saying she has urgent business, but never elaborates on what this business is. Michael seems too busy with work to notice what's happening at home. I have no complaints about taking care of Tommy. In fact, the time I spend with him gives my life meaning. But I can't help feeling a bit uneasy about Jessica's behavior. Where is she going, and why is she hiding it from Michael? Despite these concerns, I put on a cheerful face for Tommy's sake. Today is another day he's coming over. It's bound to be a fun day. With that thought, I start walking towards the front door. The doorbell rings, and when I open the door, Tommy's smiling face greets me. "Grandma," he shouts cheerfully, hugging me tightly. "Tommy, how have you been?" I ask gently. Jessica seems to be in a hurry, saying, "Thanks, Barbara. I'll pick him up in the evening," before quickly leaving. It's a familiar scene. Tommy and I head to the living room. As usual, he immediately runs to the toy box and takes out the dinosaur figurines he's been obsessed with lately. "Grandma, this is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's the king of carnivorous dinosaurs," Tommy explains excitedly. I smile as I listen, but I'm also amazed by his extensive knowledge. "That's impressive, Tommy. You've studied a lot, haven't you?" We spent the morning playing with toys while I listened to Tommy's dinosaur stories. For lunch, I made Tommy's favorite grilled cheese sandwich. "Grandma, your sandwiches are the best in the world," Tommy says with his mouth full. After lunch, we decided to go out to the garden to get some exercise in the soft autumn sunlight. Tommy runs around energetically. "Tommy, don't overdo it," I gently call out to him. After a while, Tommy comes back to me, looking a bit tired. "Grandma, let's take a little break." We sit on the bench, enjoying the garden view. Tommy leans on my shoulder, his expression peaceful. However, this peaceful moment was suddenly shattered in a tragic way. Tommy suddenly stiffened and started gasping for air. "Tommy, what's wrong?" I hurriedly support his body. The next moment, foam started coming out of Tommy's mouth, and his whole body began to convulse. I felt frozen with fear, but tried to stay calm. "Tommy, hang in there," I shouted, while quickly returning to the house to call 911. "Please hurry. My grandson is having a seizure," I desperately pleaded. The few minutes until the ambulance arrived felt like an eternity. I held Tommy's body, calling his name repeatedly. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly put Tommy on a stretcher. "Ma'am, can you come with us?" one of the paramedics asked me. I quickly grabbed my handbag and got into the ambulance. Meanwhile, I called Michael to explain the situation. "What? Tommy, I'm heading to the hospital right away," Michael answered, sounding shaken. Upon arriving at the hospital, Tommy was immediately taken to the emergency room. I waited in the waiting room, trembling with anxiety for the doctor's diagnosis. After a while, Michael and Jessica rushed in. "Mom, what exactly happened?" Michael asked. I explained in detail what had occurred. Jessica listened silently, but I thought I saw a hint of suspicion in her eyes. Finally, the attending physician appeared and gave us the initial diagnosis. Tommy's symptoms suggest a high possibility of poisoning by some toxic substance. The detailed test results will take a bit more time. The moment we heard those words, the air in the room froze. Michael was stunned, and Jessica looked surprised. "Poisoning? What do you mean?" Michael asked, visibly shaken. The doctor carefully chose his words as he answered. "We can't be certain yet, but we've detected substances in Tommy's body that shouldn't be there under normal circumstances. Until we get the detailed test results." I felt my mind go blank. How could this happen? Tommy was at my house. As I thought this, I felt Jessica's sharp gaze on me. "Barbara, what did you do to Tommy?" Jessica asked in a cold voice. I was at a loss for words and could only shake my head. Michael looked confused, glancing back and forth between Jessica and me. At that moment, I couldn't have imagined how this incident would drastically change our family's life. In the heavy atmosphere of the hospital waiting room, Jessica's cold gaze pierces me. "Barbara, be honest. What did you do to Tommy?" Jessica's voice contains clear hostility. Shaken but trying to maintain my composure, I respond. "Jessica, I didn't do anything. I was just spending time with Tommy as usual." However, Jessica refuses to believe my words. "As usual? Is there an usual way of spending time that results in poisoning?" Michael tries to intervene, but Jessica's anger doesn't subside. "Your mother hurt our son. How can you not see that?" I can't believe my ears. Could Jessica really think I'm the cause of Tommy's poisoning? "Jessica, calm down. We don't know the details yet," Michael says in an attempt to reason with her, but to no effect. Jessica confronts me. "You thought Tommy was a nuisance, didn't you? Always being suddenly left with you? It was an inconvenience." I inwardly laugh bitterly at those words. I've never once thought of Tommy as a nuisance. On the contrary, the time spent with him was my reason for living. However, Jessica's fierce accusations start to plant seeds of doubt in my mind. Could I have unknowingly given Tommy something harmful? I desperately try to recall my actions. Jessica, Mom would never do such a thing. Michael tries to defend me, but Jessica won't listen. You always take your mother's side. Think about our family. At those words, Michael's expression clouds over. I feel the pain of our family's growing rift. A nurse comes to explain Tommy's condition. Your child is stable, but he hasn't regained consciousness yet. It will take a bit more time for the detailed test results to come back. Those words bring a moment of relief, but it's quickly overwhelmed by a sense of self-reproach. Why did this happen to Tommy? Did I overlook something? Michael places his hand on my shoulder. Mom, it's going to be okay. Tommy will get better. His kindness brings tears to my eyes. However, Jessica's cold gaze negates that warmth. Michael, let's go home. We'll come back tomorrow, Jessica says. Then, turning to me, she sternly says, you stay away from Tommy. Michael looks conflicted but ends up following Jessica. As they leave, he whispers, Mom, I'll call you later. Left alone in the hospital waiting room, I'm enveloped by a deep sense of loneliness. How did it come to this? Various thoughts swirl in my head. The next day, I received a call from Michael. Mom, Jessica reported this to the police. She still suspects you. I'm shocked by his words. The police, Michael? I really didn't do anything. I know, Mom. I believe you. But it's going to be hard to convince Jessica. Michael's words offer some comfort, but I acutely feel the division in our family. Later, I had to undergo police questioning. With trembling hands, I explained in detail what happened that day. The officer listened calmly, but I thought I saw a hint of doubt in his eyes, which increased my anxiety. When I returned home, I became conscious of the neighbors' glances. Has the rumor already spread? As I spend days cooped up at home, I can't stop thinking about Tommy. One day, Michael visited me alone. Mom, are you okay? I tell him about the current situation through tears. Michael listens silently. Mom, I've been thinking. Don't you think there's something strange about this situation? At those words, I look up. Michael's eyes showed that he had seen through something. Jessica's behavior. It's a bit unnatural, as if she's hiding something. Michael's words plant a new doubt in my mind, and suddenly, small incidents that I had never paid attention to before started to take on significant meaning. As Michael's words echoed in my head, we received a call from the hospital. They said the detailed test results for Tommy were out. We rushed to the hospital, where the attending physician guided us to the examination room. Jessica was there too, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. The test results show that the substance detected in Tommy's body was a toxin called amatoxin. The doctor began explaining carefully. This is a toxin found in a poisonous mushroom called the death cap. At those words, the room fell silent. Death cap? Michael asks in surprise. There's no way Tommy would eat something like that. The doctor continues. This toxin is extremely dangerous, causing severe symptoms even in small amounts. Fortunately, thanks to early detection and appropriate treatment, Tommy's life is not in danger, but it will still take time for a full recovery. My head is spinning. Death cap? There's no way I would have something like that in my house. Suddenly, Jessica raised her voice. Barbara, you fed Tommy mushrooms you picked from your garden, didn't you? No, I didn't. I desperately deny it. There are no such poisonous mushrooms in my garden. The doctor intervenes. Actually, judging from the amount of toxin detected, it's likely that it was ingested in its pure form. In other words, you mean someone intentionally gave it to Tommy? Michael asked with a trembling voice. The doctor nods slowly. We can't rule out that possibility. At these words, a heavy silence fell over the room. After leaving the hospital, Michael headed to Barbara's house. Mom, let's investigate together. We might have overlooked something. We started searching the house meticulously. The kitchen, the living room, and the room where Tommy often played. Mom, what's this? Michael pulled out a small bag from the back of a shelf. I gasped when I saw the bag. This isn't mine. There was white powder inside the bag. Michael carefully examined it, and his face changed color. Mom, this might be amatoxin powder. But how did it get here? Suddenly, a realization struck me. Michael, I remember now. Last week Jessica came here and was looking for something. Michael's expression changes. Mom, haven't you noticed anything strange about Jessica? Her behavior has been odd lately. We started reviewing Jessica's actions, the sudden drop-offs of Tommy, unnatural outings, and her abnormal hostility towards me. Michael, is there any way you can check Jessica's phone? I tentatively suggested. Michael hesitated but eventually agreed. He accessed Jessica's phone backups, and there we made a shocking discovery. Jessica had been frequently messaging someone about planning to take Tommy's life. Oh my God, Michael is at a loss for words. We immediately contacted the police. After showing them the evidence and explaining the situation, the police quickly took action. A few hours later, we received word that Jessica had been arrested. She apparently confessed everything during the interrogation. Her motive was my inheritance. She had planned to kill Tommy and pin the blame on me, severing Michael's relationship with me and gaining the right to inherit my estate. Learning this truth, Michael and I were speechless. Why would she go to such lengths? When we returned to the hospital, Tommy had regained consciousness. Seeing his weak smile, we couldn't hold back our tears. Grandma, Dad, we heard Tommy's small voice. We sat by Tommy's bed, holding his hand tightly. The road ahead might be long, but we will overcome it together as a family. The truth came to light, and my innocence was proven. However, the scars left by this incident won't heal easily. Still, as we watch over Tommy's recovery, we have no choice but to move forward little by little. After Jessica's arrest, our family faced a great trial. Michael was deeply hurt by his wife's betrayal and became quiet for a while. However, as he focused on Tommy's recovery, he gradually began to recover himself. In court, Jessica admitted to all her crimes. Her motives were more complex than we had imagined. Drowning in debt and unable to break free from her addiction to luxury brands, she had been looking for an easy way to get a large sum of money, and that's when she set her sights on my inheritance. In court, Jessica tearfully apologized. I'm truly sorry. I was blinded by greed and ended up hurting my precious family. Her words left us with mixed feelings. Jessica received a sentence of 15 years in prison. Michael decided to divorce and began walking a new path in life. Meanwhile, Tommy's recovery was surprisingly quick, and his strength encouraged us. After being discharged, Tommy came to live at my house. Grandma, I'm so happy we can live together, Tommy said, and my heart filled with warmth. From this experience, we reaffirmed the importance of family bonds. At the same time, we learned the dangers of trusting people too easily. Now we are starting a new life. Michael is devoted to his work while cherishing his time with Tommy. I feel that my mission is to protect this family. While we have anxieties about the future, we also have hope. If we could overcome this ordeal, surely we can overcome any difficulty. As I watch Tommy playing energetically in the garden, I think to myself, life is full of unexpected events, but if we walk together with our loved ones,